The banquet hall in central Shanghai glowed with warm, golden lights. Laughter echoed across the marble floors as waiters in crisp white uniforms weaved through the tables with plates of steaming delicacies. It was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. My only son, Zhang Wei, was getting married. But as I sat there, alone at a table in the corner, watching others raise their glasses and toast the couple, I felt invisible. My name is Lu Mylan. I raised Zhang Wei as a single mother after my husband passed away when he was just 6. I scrubbed floors, sold baozi in the cold, and mended torn shirts at night just to keep food on the table and pay for his schooling. When he was accepted into Fudan University, I cried tears of joy and exhaustion. I thought, maybe now life will begin to repay us. But today, I wore a borrowed qipao, my hair styled by a neighbor, and not one family member from the bride's side came over to greet me. I smiled through it all. Zhang Wei had looked dashing in his black suit earlier. When he came over to greet me before the ceremony, his hug felt brief, distracted. He was quickly pulled away by his bride, Qian Rou, a woman from a wealthy business family who barely acknowledged me. She wore a pearl-white gown, her skin flawless, her smile only for the camera. I told myself perhaps she is nervous. Perhaps everything is moving too fast. I was wrong. As the meal began, every table was served in order. First the bride's family, then the groom's friends, then colleagues, neighbors, and even distant relatives. I waited patiently, smiling at the servers, but no one came to my table. Time passed. People were already asking for second helpings when a young waitress approached me, cheeks red with embarrassment. She placed a small plate of cold duck slices and wilted vegetables before me. I am so sorry, this is all that's left. She bowed and left in a hurry. I stared at the plate. No rice, no soup, just leftovers. Around me, laughter continued. Glasses clinked. Someone sang a song for the couple. I sat quietly and picked at the food, my fingers trembling slightly. I kept my eyes dry. I couldn't cry, not here, not now. Not when everyone else was celebrating. As I swallowed each cold bite, I began to feel something shifting inside me. Not sadness, not even anger. It was the weight of years spent giving, sacrificing, believing. And suddenly I felt nothing. Just cold. The wedding reception dragged on as I sat quietly in my chair, pretending to smile whenever someone looked my way. Zhang Wei never returned to my table. Neither did Qian Rou. Her parents, seated at the front with proud expressions, never once turned to acknowledge me. It was as if I was merely a forgotten detail in the background of their perfect family portrait. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Auntie Lian, my late husband's older cousin. She was the only relative from our side who had managed to attend. She gave me a look of concern and shuffled over discreetly. "Mylan," she whispered, leaning close, "did they really serve you this so late?" I nodded slowly. Her lips tightened. Shameful. I said nothing. She reached into her purse and handed me a steamed bun she had secretly taken from her plate.
Warm. Soft.
I accepted it with both hands, swallowing the lump in my throat. We shared that quiet moment together, two widowed women in the corner of a room that didn't want us there. When the couple stepped onto the stage for their final speech, Zhang Wei took the microphone and began thanking everyone, colleagues, friends, teachers, the bride's family. He mentioned how grateful he was for their support, how much he looked forward to the future. Everyone clapped. Then, at the very end, he added with a quick glance towards my direction. "And thank you, Mum." Just 3 words. No story. No emotion. No pride. People clapped again, none of them aware that I had eaten cold leftovers in a borrowed dress. I nodded politely as if those words meant the world, even though my heart grew heavier. Later, when the crowd thinned and people began to leave, I waited patiently. Zhang Wei walked past me with Qian Rou on his arm. He smiled slightly but did not stop. "Take care, Mum," he muttered. That was it. No hug. No gratitude. No apology. He walked on. And I, Lu Mylan, who had once carried him in my arms through monsoon rains to get to school, now sat beneath crystal chandeliers feeling like a stranger. The lights began to dim. Waiters collected plates. I stood slowly, my joints aching from the long day. As I turned to leave, Auntie Lian gently took my hand. "You raised a fine boy," she said softly. "But the world he married into doesn't see the soil that grew the tree. Only the fruit." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I stepped out into the cold Shanghai night, the streetlights flickered above me. I realized I had no ride arranged.
No one had thought of that.
I walked slowly to the corner, wrapped my thin shawl tighter, and waited for a taxi. Inside me, something had begun to stir. Not a demand for revenge, but a quiet resolve. I had been invisible too long. A week passed after the wedding, and the house returned to its usual stillness. My small flat in Pudong felt colder than usual, not because of the weather, but because of the silence. No phone call, no message, no visit. The red envelopes I had saved for years, the small savings I had poured into helping with the wedding preparations, forgotten. I was not even given a photo of that day. I told myself not to expect anything, but deep down, I had hoped for a gesture. A thank you note, a leftover bouquet, even a silly fridge magnet with the couple's names. But there was nothing. One morning, while tidying the kitchen, I received a video from Auntie Lian. It was footage from the wedding, posted by one of Qianruo's cousins on social media. I clicked it out of curiosity, and my heart froze. The video showed a lavish dinner party held the next evening, after the wedding. A private gathering for close family and VIP guests. They called it the real celebration. Zhang Wei and Qianruo were smiling in every shot, clinking glasses, hugging guests. Their parents sat at the center table. Everyone looked happy and well-fed. I was not there. I had not been invited. As I watched them sing karaoke and pose beside the oversized cake, something inside me cracked. Not because I wanted the champagne or the silk napkins, but because I understood, fully and painfully, I no longer fit into my own son's life. He had made his choice. I was part of his past, but not his present. Certainly not his future. Later that afternoon, I went to visit the community garden, the one where I sometimes helped tend to the chrysanthemums. Old Mr. Shin greeted me with a toothless smile. He had known me since I moved to the neighborhood. "You look tired, Mylan," he said gently. I nodded. "It's been a long week. Something wrong with your son?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Nothing. Just life." He looked at me with kind eyes and offered me a small bamboo stool. We sat side by side under the shade of the peach tree, the flowers gently swaying in the breeze. He didn't need to say anything else. Sometimes, silence was kinder than words. That evening, I lit incense at my husband's memorial and knelt on the cold floor. My tears fell silently, not out of sorrow but release. Whatever illusion I had held on to, I now let go. 2 days later, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a message on my phone. A real letter, tucked into a cream envelope with my name written in delicate black ink. The handwriting was familiar. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Zhang Wei, but not the Zhang Wei I had seen at the wedding. This was the voice of the boy who used to sit beside me after school, asking endless questions about life, who used to make me tea with too much sugar just to make me laugh. The letter read, "Dear Mum, I know I failed you. I didn't say it on the wedding day because I didn't know how. Every time I looked at you, I saw guilt.
Not yours, mine.
I wanted to impress everyone so badly that I forgot the one person who mattered most. You gave up your whole life for me. I remember the nights you worked overtime just to buy me shoes, the mornings you skipped breakfast, so I could have more rice in my bowl. I remember everything, Mum. I am sorry." Qianruo's family sees the world differently. They believe in order, appearances, control. I thought if I followed their rules, they would accept me. But in doing so, I erased you. I erased myself. I can't take that day back. But I want to make things right. Please, can I come home next week? Just to have dinner. Just you and me. Love, Zhang Wei. I read it twice. Then again. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My chest felt tight, not from pain, but something heavier.
Hope.
But hope was dangerous. It made you believe in things that might never come true. Still, I placed the letter beside the incense burner. I cleaned the kitchen. I folded the best tablecloth. I went to the market and bought tofu, lotus root, and his favorite ginger soy chicken. Every sound in the corridor made my heart skip. Days passed. Then a week. Then another. He never came. No message followed. The food went cold, then into the bin. The letter stayed where I had left it, its edges curling ever so slightly with time. Maybe he had changed his mind. Or maybe the pressure of his new life had spoken louder than his old heart. The days became slow and heavy, like walking through fog that never lifted. One morning, needing air, I wandered into the garden area, a place filled with tourists and vendors, where smells of sesame oil and roasted chestnuts drifted from every corner. I walked without purpose, only following my feet. Then I saw her, an old woman inside a quiet jade shop tucked between two tea stalls. She had a narrow face, soft eyes, and a string of green beads in her hand. The kind of woman you noticed without knowing why. She nodded at me as I stepped inside. "Looking for something in particular?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "Just passing time." She gestured to the display. "Sometimes jade finds you, not the other way around." I smiled politely, ready to leave. But then I noticed a small pendant, carved in the shape of a phoenix, old and cracked, but still beautiful. It reminded me of a hairpin my mother once wore before the revolution. The woman saw me looking and said, "That one came from a woman who lost everything except her pride." I asked how much it was. She studied me for a moment, then said, "It's not for sale. But if you promise to wear it when you need strength, I'll give it to you." I hesitated. "Why me?" She simply replied, "You look like someone who's learning how to stand alone." I left the shop with the pendant wrapped in red cloth, the weight of it strangely comforting against my chest. Later that night, I sat by the window, holding the pendant, watching the lights of Shanghai flicker across the river. Zhang Wei hadn't come. Qianruo hadn't called. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel empty. I felt quiet. Not peace, not yet. But something close. That small jade phoenix felt like a whisper from the past, a reminder that I had not always been a mother or a wife, or a disappointment. I had once been Mylan, and Mylan still existed. It happened just as I was starting to let go. A white envelope slid through the door one afternoon. No postmark. No name on the front. Inside was a card. Heavy paper, embossed edges, printed in deep gold ink. "You are cordially invited to a private dinner, hosted by Qianruo and Zhang Wei. Location: the Orchid Pavilion, level 38, Bun Tower. Date: Saturday. Time: 6 p.m. I stared at it, heart thudding. No note. No apology. No explanation. Just a summons, one that felt more like a test than a reconciliation. The Orchid Pavilion was one of Shanghai's most exclusive restaurants. Glass walls overlooked the Huangpu River, and the menu featured dishes you had to pre-order weeks in advance. I had walked past it countless times, never once imagining I'd step inside. I didn't know if I was expected to accept. But I went. I wore a simple dark blue qipao, the one I had kept in plastic since my birthday 10 years ago. The jade phoenix hung quietly around my neck, brushing against my collarbone. The lift doors opened to soft music and candlelight. A hostess led me to a corner table where Zhang Wei and Qianruo were already seated. He stood awkwardly. She smiled, thin and controlled. "Mother," Zhang Wei said. His voice wavered. I nodded and sat. For a while, no one spoke. Dishes arrived one by one: duck with orange glaze, sea cucumber stew, scallops in black truffle sauce. Everything perfect. Everything cold. Not in temperature, but in tone. Meant to impress, not to comfort. Zhang Wei poured tea into my cup with trembling hands. I wanted to see you," he said, eyes on the table. "Thank you for coming." Qianruo reached over and placed her hand on his. "We thought a private meal would be more respectful." Respectful.
Not warm.
Not loving. Just respectful. They talked about their new apartment, a possible move to Singapore, her family's business expanding into tech. No questions about me. No mention of the wedding. Until dessert. Zhang Wei looked up suddenly. Mother, would you like to say something? I met his eyes. I saw the boy who used to chase fireflies in the courtyard, and the man who had chosen silence over shame. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I had so many things to say, but not here. Not now. Instead, I took my napkin, folded it slowly, and placed it on the table. I have nothing to say at a table where I'm only half invited, I said softly.
And I stood.
Neither of them stopped me. The lift was silent as it carried me back down, away from the city lights, from the polished floor, from the sun I used to know. After the dinner, something inside me shifted. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply walked. Through the crowded night markets of Nanshire, past lovers holding hands, families laughing over street food, tourists snapping pictures they would never print. I walked until my feet blistered, until the neon lights began to blur. And I kept going. By dawn, I found myself at the steps of the Longhua Temple. The monks were sweeping leaves from the stone paths. Bells rang gently in the distance, marking the morning chant. I had not been there in years, but I stepped inside, unsure why. The scent of incense clung to the air like memory. I lit a stick and knelt before the golden statue of the Buddha. Around me, people whispered prayers, some for healing, others for peace, most for answers they could not name aloud. I whispered nothing. I only breathed. Then I heard her. A voice, soft, cracked with age, behind me. You are holding too many names inside you. I turned. A nun, perhaps in her 70s, stood with a broom in hand. Her eyes were sharp, though her body was thin and bent. You carry guilt, sorrow, motherhood, betrayal, she said. Too many names. No space left for yourself. I didn't respond. I felt suddenly like a child again, ashamed of being seen too clearly. You were not born to be forgotten, she added, stepping closer. And you were not born only to serve the lives of others. My throat tightened. How do I let go? I asked. She shrugged gently. First, remember your own name. Then she turned and continued sweeping the stone floor, as if the answer had been simple all along. That afternoon, I returned home. I opened every drawer, every cabinet. I found old photos of me in my youth, laughing in Hangzhou by the lake, dancing barefoot on a rooftop with friends now long gone, writing poems I had once believed in. I took a photo of myself from those days and pinned it to the mirror. On the back, I wrote, Mylan, daughter, dreamer, survivor, not just mother, not just mother-in-law.
Me.
The air that summer carried the weight of rain, though the skies remained stubbornly clear. I spent most of my days quietly, cleaning corners no one else would notice, watering plants that no longer bloomed, cooking for one. Until one afternoon, someone knocked at my door. Not a package. Not a neighbor. Not a government official. It was Zhang Wei. He looked thinner, paler. His collar hung loose on his neck, and his shoes were dusty. I opened the door and said nothing. He hesitated, then stepped inside. No invitation, but no protest either. The silence between us stretched, like thread pulled too tight. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said at the restaurant. I had said very little, but sometimes silence speaks the most. I didn't realize how far I had gone, he continued. How far from you. He stood in the living room, staring at the faded photo of our family, his father holding him as a baby, me beside them with hair pinned neatly, our smiles still innocent. Qianro doesn't know I'm here, he added. She wouldn't have agreed. I raised an eyebrow. Then why did you come? He swallowed. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what it must have felt like for you, he said. To be last. To be fed leftovers. To be treated like a stranger at your own son's wedding. His voice cracked. I told myself it wasn't my decision. That it was the planner, the seating chart, the rush. But it was my decision. I let it happen. And I let you down. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. My face calm, my heart racing. You said nothing for months, I replied. And now you expect forgiveness? He shook his head.
No.
I don't expect it. I wanted to see you. I wanted to come here without anyone else's voice in my head.
Just mine.
And yours. The tea kettle whistled from the stove. I turned and poured 2 cups. One for me, one for him. No words. No embrace. But he sat. And I let him. The days that followed were still. Zhang Wei came by again. Not every day, but often enough to be noticed. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. He brought me dumplings once, not store-bought, but folded by hand. The edges slightly uneven, just as I used to make them when he was small. I nearly cried then. Not because of the dumplings, because he remembered how I made them. We never addressed the wound directly. Not the table. Not the cold leftovers. Not how I sat alone while others toasted with laughter. But the wound lived with us, quietly. A guest in the room. Then one morning, I received a message. A dinner invitation. From Qianro. The wording was careful, polite. Not apologetic, but not dismissive either. She asked if I would come to their flat for dinner. My hands trembled as I held the phone. I had no idea what to expect. A trap, a performance, another humiliation. But something inside me whispered, go. I arrived just before sunset. Their flat was sleek, modern, and cold in that rich sort of way. Too many mirrors. Too many untouched decorations. But the table was set for 3. Only 3. No assistants. No cousins. No waitstaff. Just family. Qianro greeted me in a pale blue blouse, her hair tied simply. She looked tired. Not in a bad way, in the way someone does when they've stopped trying to be perfect. She led me to the table. I cooked, she said, offering a faint smile. Not the staff. I nodded and took my seat. Zhang Wei poured tea, for all 3 of us. No one spoke. The first dish was placed in front of me.
Hot.
Steaming. I could see the heat rising from it like mist on a river. They waited.
Watched.
And I ate. The food was not perfect. Too much salt. A little undercooked. But it was warm. It was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. Not as a mother-in-law. Not as a servant. But as a person with a place at the table. It was not a grand reconciliation. There were no dramatic hugs, no speeches, no sudden flood of tears. But it was real. In the days that followed that dinner, something began to shift. Not loudly, but gently, like the slow melt of frost after a long, bitter winter. Qianro sent me messages now. Not often, but she asked how I was. Sent photos of the meals she tried to make. A new soup recipe. A crooked dumpling. Zhang Wei would drop by on the weekends, sometimes just to sit. Sometimes we said nothing at all. But presence, I had learned, was its own kind of language. And one morning, a package arrived. Inside it, a framed photo. The 3 of us, me, Zhang Wei, and Qianro, seated at that small dinner table. No smiles forced. No poses. Just a candid moment. My hand mid-reach. Qianro laughing at something unseen. Zhang Wei looking between us, soft-eyed. On the back of the frame, a note in Zhang Wei's handwriting. We see you now. I held the frame close to my chest. Not long after, another invitation came, not to a wedding, but a celebration. Their new home. They wanted me to be the first to walk through the doors. This time, I didn't arrive alone. A friend from the neighborhood offered to walk with me. When I stepped into their home, there was no hesitation. No one looked past me. No one whispered. And when dinner was served, I was not last. I was first. The table had no hierarchy, no sections divided by importance. It was one long table, warm food flowing from hand to hand, voices overlapping in joy. And when Zhang Wei raised his glass that night, he did not toast to wealth, or a legacy, or appearance. He said, to those who raised us, and those we must never forget. His eyes met mine. And for the first time, I no longer carried the ache of that wedding day. Because I had been seen. Because I was there. Because I was part of the story, not the end of it.